Politicians don't understand people who do good simply because it's right. Makes them nervous.
Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. And we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Monday. We are kicking off the week on August 5th with a suspendable guest. We're going to be talking about a story that broke over the weekend, and you guys are going to want to hear about this. Sonya LaBosco will be joining me momentarily. Let's kind of give you a little preview of where we're going to go. We're going to talk about what's going on with the Federal Air Marshals. It's been a little while since we've touched that story, and some of you are not familiar with Sonya and what she's been doing, the activism she is doing on behalf of federal law enforcement, and probably a group that you're not even well aware of. We'll talk about what they are, what the Federal Air Marshals are, what we call the FAMs, and we're going to get into some revelations. There's more to come on that as well. So this is an ongoing and updating story, and we'll bring her back as many times as she wants to come and join us. On top of that, we're going to be talking about a little bit of what's going on internationally. It sounds like there are some stock market readjustments happening overseas. I don't necessarily care, although if you do have your money in the stock market, it might be a good time to take a deep breath and pause and remember it's only money, right? Or remember that it is, in fact, the people that are running these countries that are screwing up your lives. We're going to talk some Kamala Harris polls. That'll be fun. A little bit of insanity going on in the UK, kind of this like backlash that's going on from the immigrant stabbing that happened, or the immigrant kid stabbing. There was a Rwandan, and then apparently the Muslims decided to go out there in March, which made some angry white people do some angry white people stuff. That'll be really interesting. And I've got a little bit more about the story we talked about with George Hill on Thursday. If you guys were there for that, we're going to get into that as well. Before we do any of those things, let's go ahead and say thanks to our sponsors who keep us on the air, and we will appreciate them right now. Folks, I need you to stop what you're doing, especially in light of all these crazy things I just told you. Your God-given freedoms are up for the takings, and even worse, those doing the takings are the same ones who swore to defend them. Now, they can violate your freedom to protect your family. They think they can force their delusions on your children, and they think that they can control the media and hide the truth. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But what they cannot take away is peace of mind, self-reliance, and you should be asking yourself, are you prepared with water filtration? Do you have a solar generator or energy alternatives? Do you have emergency food on your shelves? You can get it now, just like I did from My Patriot Supply. They've served millions of American families. My Patriot Supply is the most trusted name in survival, and for the damn good reason. You can go to preparelikeKyle.com right now. Save $200 on the best-selling 3-month emergency food kit. I did the same thing. I've got 2 of them in my closet at the moment. It delivers over 2,000 calories per day at a price less than $5.25 per day. They've got these great packagings that are going to last for up to 25 years. Go to preparelikeKyle, as you see on the screen, Prepare like Kyle. Save $200 and you're going to get free shipping. That's the big one for me. I hate paying for shipping, and we're talking about 110 pounds of food. So you're going to want to make sure you do that. Go to preparelikeKyle.com. Let's bring on my friend and my guest for the day. You want to unmute yourself, ma'am? Miss Sonya LaBosco. She's the executive director of the the Air Marshals National Council. You guys always threw me off with that because I keep wanting to put the fan piece in there. And she is available on Twitter if you guys want to find her. It's LaBosco Sonya on all the handles. There she is. Welcome to the program. Good morning.
Hey, great to see you, Colin. Thanks for having me back on.
Well, of course, especially when you guys have stories breaking in the news. Let's do this because we've got a different audience every day. A new group of people join us. So let's talk about who you are, what position you hold, your kind of career in law enforcement, and then we'll move forward and we'll talk about the story, which is, I think, unsettling for a lot of Americans. Give people a little taste of what your law enforcement background is, if you would.
Well, Kyle, I started my law enforcement career back in 1990 with Daytona Beach Police Department, and I worked my way up to the rank of sergeant. and worked at Daytona until shortly after 9/11 when I witnessed the events of what happened on 9/11. I was a midnight shift sergeant, came home from an overnight shift and was just, trying to get some shut eye, turned the tube on, and then I saw what happened with the towers when they went down. So I applied to become an air marshal after that, left my career with Daytona, had a great career with them, loved my job, but felt I had a higher calling to come over to the Federal Air Marshal Service. So I joined the Federal Air Marshal Service in June of 2002. And I have to tell you, it's been a wild ride. Came over for the right reasons, but here in the last couple of years, our agency has morphed into something that is not set up to protect the American people.
Can we talk a little bit about what the mission of the Air Marshals was, then post 9/11, what it became, and then we'll kind of get into how it's been used as a political tool, I guess, of late?
Absolutely. Well, JFK was the first, he was the first president that recognized the need for the air marshals. So our program actually got kicked off in 1962. We've had the pleasure of meeting one of the original air marshals. He's 98 years old today. That was sworn in by Robert F. Kennedy. He's a great gentleman. So we wanted to do some history on the program. So we've spoken with air marshals from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000, and then post 2001. And it's amazing to me that this program has been bounced around for the last 60 plus years. We've never had a permanent home. They move us from the FAA to Customs to ICE and then now to TSA, which is a complete disaster. So our program pre 9/11, we only flew on international missions. We did not fly on any domestic missions. So pre 9/11, everyone flew. You would be deployed about 3 weeks to an international locations, and we would fly anywhere that there's an American flag carrier. So if there's a country that there's an American carrier that goes to, then you could expect that the air marshals would be on those flights internationally. What changed after 9/11 was the domestic missions. We know that the hijackers took all domestic flights that were long hauls, East Coast to West Coast. So that changed our mission completely after 9/11. And we began flying both domestically and international with a high emphasis on domestic.
What is the biggest misconception, would you say, about the Federal Air Marshals? I'm guessing it has to do with that cross with using the word marshals in more than one agency. Is that accurate?
It is accurate. It is.
Because you guys are not the same thing.
It's a high speed, low drag, right? You do high speed training. You're prepared to use your firearm at 35,000 feet, but yet you have to be super patient and stay alert and just stay mission driven, because it can be a very monotonous job to fly around the world day in and day out.
Can you also, I was thinking, some of the countries that you said flag carriers are in, give people some examples of maybe places either they don't think or, don't occur to them. Because you guys are doing these long haul crazy, and you have to stay awake, I guess, all the way through.
Yeah. Well, we go to China, we go to Taiwan, we go to Bangkok, Manila, the Philippines, Germany, Paris, anywhere in Deutschland. So we do some pretty incredible long 17, 18, 20-hour flights, with no rest. This is the one thing about air marshals. We are not regulated by the FAA like pilots and flight attendants. So the agency can fly us up to 24 hours with no rest. So we're unregulated as well. So we've been fighting to try to get regular hours for our air marshals so they can stay sharp when they fly.
Yeah, let's kind of dig into why that would be. So the FAA regulates what is called air crew or crew rest, which means there's only so many hours in a day you can fly. And then you have to actually have mandated crew rest, lest you be someone who's not paying attention. And that includes, I think, flight attendants, right? They have to have shifts on and shift off.
That is absolutely correct. I've actually been on missions in a foreign country. I'll just name one in Germany, where the flight crew needed to get their rest. We were at the airport ready to go, but they had gone over their time. So we had to stay at the airport while we waited on a new flight crew to come and replace the flight crew because they were like 3 minutes over their allotted time. So we sat and waited 6 hours to go on a 12-hour trip home. So we worked, 24 hours that day because we have to be at the airport 3 hours early. And it wasn't a problem. We came home, got a little bit of rest, and we flew the next day. So we are unregulated per the Aviation Transportation Security Act that President Bush put into place after 9/11, and it gives TSA dictatorial powers over our schedules.
You want to talk about numbers, broadly speaking, because we don't want to give away any kind of state secrets here, but there are not a ton of you all out there in the world.
No, prior to 9/11, there were only 33, and they flew all international.
33.
There were only 33. The program started in the 60s. In the 1960s, there was not a plane that did not have an air marshal deployed on it. So they really did it right. But they flew international, too. There's a difference, right? But it was pretty cool because the air marshals back then, they were assigned to a specific airline and a specific air crew. So they worked for 3 weeks with the same people, which is kind of cool if you think about the teamwork aspect and how you have to work together if something really critical happens on the aircraft. But post 9/11, and you can Google some of these numbers, there were thousands of air marshals that were hired pretty quickly. And we know when you do anything quickly, fast is not always good. So there's been a lot of learning curves and a lot of bumps in the road over the last 23 years in the agency. And we just hope that we can see in our day, most of the air marshals now have over 20 years, Kyle. They joined this effort back in 2001. You know, we're coming up on the 23rd anniversary, and a lot of air marshals are leaving. They do not like where our mission has gone post Biden. And we've morphed into something that we don't recognize anymore.
That seems to be the case for Secret Service. It seems to be the case for people in the FBI that have a wherewithal. People are going to OIG positions, the Office of Inspector General, the less politicized stuff if they can. And I know it's happening in DHS, but not a good thing that it's happening to air marshals. What about recruiting? Do you guys have the same issues that the other federal agencies are seeing?
We're having some major issues. Number one, we have to recruit, though, right? You have to be actively recruiting and trying to hire people. There's no way that you're going to be able to put 15 to 20 people through an academy and think that you're going to backfill these positions. It takes about a year to get someone schooled up, really, to be out. And they're not even out on their own at that point, but it's about a year. You think of the investment, the top secret clearance, the things that you have to go through. And let's face it, half the people don't go through that. So if you start off with 20 in an academy, you'll be lucky to end up with 7.
What about job classification? So a lot of federal agents go underneath the category 1811. Is that the same thing for the FAMs, or are you guys something else?
Nope. We got another bear trap they got us caught in, Kyle. They keep us as an 1801, our 1801 series, which is another way to trap us within the agency, because 1811s, if we were all 1811s, would have the ability to maneuver around within the federal government. So even though we do very big high-level investigations with Joint Terrorism Task Force, with HSI Best Task Force teams, the agency keeps that boot on our neck and keeps us as an 1801 so we can't leave.
And just so people have the wherewithal, the understanding, when you have a specific job code within the federal government, you can apply for other jobs within that. So if you're a U.S., let's say, Secret Service agent, you could apply to be an FBI agent and come across. And I had people who did that. If you're in the U.S. Marshal Service and you have an 1811 job, you can go and apply to the FBI or an OIG, or you can go to the Commerce Department, or you can go anywhere, DEA, ATF. I don't know why you would do that, but you could. So anyway, you can move into any of these other 1811 jobs, but you guys are stuck in that. I want to talk about one little last piece of your personal history, because you had a slightly early retirement, and I want to give people just a sense of who you are as a person, because it's the reason why I think we get along. Will you tell people a little bit about why you were able to leave the agency early, or why you had to leave early, and then maybe kind of your little your four-wheeled FU that you roll around in? Is that something we could talk about?
Yeah, well, I sustained a pretty critical injury on duty. I was hurt pretty severe in a car accident where I had to have a disc put in my neck, or a plate put in my neck, and I had some pretty severe injuries. So, I mean, they forced me out. I mean, the agency wanted me out, as you can tell. I'm pretty boisterous as regards to what I think I need to do to save and support our country. That's not really welcomed within the federal government. Someone like me is not who they're looking for as a candidate to hire. But yeah, they forced me out, and what they did was inappropriate. They shouldn't have treated me that way. And I did take them to court, and I won both cases. One case they settled, both cases I won outright. And they bought me a little a gift, and I do drive around in that gift. And the gift of my vehicle has a "Thanks FAMS" on the car tag. So it's a personalized tag. So when I pull up in the office to rep other air marshals under the Air Marshal National Council, I make sure I park that in front of the SAC's office so he can see how his actions and the actions of the agency really are the wrong thing to do. And so we're trying to invoke change any way we can at every level within the agency.
So for people, I'm going to restate that another way. You've got kind of this this vanity plate that says "Thanks, FAMs." Is that right? Is that what it says?
That's correct.
And it's just kind of a little middle finger to the people that had to pay her out because they tried to do the wrong thing. Pretty fun, pretty amusing. I've seen your little sporty ride that runs around, and I like the idea that you park it right where they can see it, probably out their windows. And you guys are representing federal air marshals who are on the job as people who used to do the job, and you're the only ones who can really speak out. Let's talk about whistleblower protections and the folks that are inside your agency that are outraged, because that's where we're going here.
Well, there's a lot of whistleblowers. I mean, you got to look at the things that have been happening in the last several years, and I'll put it into place. One of the biggest things that happened is when we were flying missions to China, the federal government, the Biden administration, they forced us to give our information to China. So we had undercover agents flying into China, but we had to notify them who those agents were and the flights that they were on. Not only did we notify them of who the air marshals were, we had to give them the air marshal's home address, and also their family information. And there were air marshals that absolutely did not want to give the CCP their information. So the agency came back and disciplined them. They suspended a lot of air marshals who refused to give their information to the CCP.
What year was
that? So that was 2000, at the end of 2020, right before the pandemic started. So we started fighting that issue. Mm-hmm. Also, too, right after the issue with China, we had an issue with the American flag mask. When everything started breaking with the Black Lives Matter in the summer of love 2020, we had air marshals that had gator-style masks that had American flags on them, and they were refused boarding by some flight crews because they said the American flag was going to cause a conflict with other people on the aircraft, that they had to take their flags off. So that was the second battle that we went against the agency. Then the COVID-19 mandates came out, and we fought the COVID-19 mandates. Our members did not take the COVID shot. We stood up and we told our members, if you don't want to take that shot, you don't have to. And we won every case. We had hundreds of cases. We won every case, and none of our members had to take that shot. They did not. So that was the next battle against the agency. Then there was the battle with them taking us off high-risk flights and making us work at the military bases with the Afghan refugee details. When we pulled out of that failure in Afghanistan, they took air marshals off high-risk flights and put us at military bases, working Afghan refugee details on the ground. It made zero sense for us to be on military bases when we should be on the aircraft protecting people. Then the next debacle from this agency was the southern border. They took us off high-risk flights to send us down to the southern border. What an absolute nightmare, and unjustified, by the way. There was a report that just came out from DHS OIG that says TSA did not even assess the impact it would have on our aviation for them to remove us from the aircraft and send us down to the border. I mean, everywhere you go in this agency with the Transportation Security Administration is an absolute train wreck.
It makes sense because we've all been through TSA. We've all had the fondling and tried to understand why, grandmas in wheelchairs are the ones that are getting searched, and some guy that looks like the guys that we've seen fly planes and stuff into buildings, those guys get a little bit more of a hands-off approach. I don't know. I used to sit, this is just a little personal story, but I used to do surveillance, right? And inside the airport. So that's something that the FAM sometimes do. You guys do in the airport and on the airplane, right?
Oh yeah, we do it. And even off the airport too. We follow
out
off airport property as well.
So I would go behind security when I was an FBI agent. This is something we have the ability to do. So your badging, credentials, you're signing the form, you're going in behind into the secured area, and you're armed like you would be. And I would go and I would post up behind the area where TSA allows people to come in from the general public. And I would just sit on a bench and wait for my subject to come in. And nobody ever noticed that some guy came in from the opposite way, sat there and plunked down for 10, 15 minutes at a time, looking for somebody and then following them out. I never had anybody come up and say, hey, what are you doing here? I had no luggage. I'm just a guy walking around, sitting down at this thing. They're so lackadaisical in their security posture, which is probably why I think TSA, the last time they were publishing the audits, they have like a 90 or a 95% failure rate. You probably know better than I do. But they don't do a great job. So the FAMs are the last line of defense and maybe the only line of defense sometimes.
And they pull us off the flights. I mean, I've been on missions on the ground that were very important. Look, we can work in the airport environment too. We have a lot of issues with active shooters. We have a lot of issues that are going on within the airports. Mm-hmm. FAMs are invaluable on the ground at the airports or in the aircraft. But think of this current situation that we're getting ready to talk about. We have air marshals that were pulled off high-risk flights. They're sent to the border. We're doing non-law enforcement duties on the border, and we're bringing terrorists in. There's a lot of reports. There's hundreds of terrorists that came across the border. We give them a notice to appear. We don't ID them. We let them go to the airport. We create a special lane in TSA for them to go through screening so they're not like the regular people, the regular Americans. And we put them on an airplane that we know that the air marshals are not going to be on.
Before, let's let you alluded to it, so let's throw it on here. There's a story that just came out over the weekend, an exclusive that Wendy Mahoney wrote at Uncover DC. So great job on her exposing this and getting this out. It says exclusive: the Federal Air Marshal whistleblowers are reporting Tulsi Gabbard is actively under surveillance via the QuietSkies program. And we can get into some of the details. You've got a little bit. She shared a little bit, which I'm sure came from you. Let's talk about the broad strokes of what QuietSkies is, and then we'll get into Tulsi Gabbard and why in the world she is on it.
So QuietSkies was a program that was started, it's over a decade, by TSA. And this program has been an absolute failure. There's not been one. DHS-OIG also did a report on that in 2020 that said the program was an absolute failure, that they had failed to even come up with one known suspected domestic terrorist or one guardian lead anywhere with the FBI. Nowhere has there been success to this program. But this was started as one of those mission creeps. And the true intent of it when it started was it's supposed to be a tool for federal air marshals to utilize to identify either, high-risk passengers that would be a risk on that particular flight, or a high-risk person that's connected to someone that wanted to create an issue within the aviation domain. So it was started with the right reason. It was started to be a tool. And I flew those missions. Some of those missions were absolutely correct in the very beginning. But what is morphed into year after year, it's a way to pump up metrics for Congress, right? We're going to pad our numbers. Look, we went from following, and I'll just use this number. It's not an accurate number. It's just for the audience so I can just reflect on it. Let's say we followed 5,000 QuietSkies missions. Well, to Congress, they think that's connected to suspected domestic terrorism, right? Well, within QuietSkies, we could take those 5,000 missions, and now we can make it 50,000. So now we just increased our numbers tremendously. So guess what? We need more money in our budget. Look at the great work we're doing. We're following all these suspected domestic terrorists. We're following all these people that have some type of thin thread to terrorism. So as the numbers grow, and they're assigning air marshals to these flights, good and well knowing that there is not one threat to aviation security, but they're pumping the numbers up to get more money from Congress.
So you're quoted pretty extensively in this article. Let's talk about the Tulsi Gabbard situation. Actually, I got a little video. This was referenced out of the piece, so I want to play it. It's a little piece of Tulsi Gabbard talking somewhat critically. This is in July of this year, so just last month, and she's not particularly favorable to a Kamala presidency, it sounds. Here's a little taste of Tulsi Gabbard talking, then we're going to reflect on why that is important.
I'm more interested, Laura, in what the American people are thinking. I've been seeing headline after headline saying, well, what is Kamala Harris's foreign policy going to be? And then you are reminded by these examples of how inexperienced and lacking of knowledge and strength that she is. So to answer that question, what kind of commander-in-chief will she be? What kind of foreign policy will she have? We simply need to look at the facts of what we've seen under the Biden-Harris administration. They are not running our foreign policy. Our foreign policy decisions are being made by unelected people in the military-industrial complex who are profiting from us being in a constant state of war, and the national security state that has more power to undermine our freedoms and liberties when we are in a state of war.
Well, that's an interesting little take. She doesn't seem to like that. And what's the result of this?
The result of this is she ended up on the QuietSkies list after that interview.
How do we know that?
Because we have the dates and the times, and we have the missions that the air marshals were assigned to fly with her. And also, too, it's interesting. The Ingram angle seems to be a catalyst for people that go on the Ingram angle to get interviewed. They seem to end up on this QuietSkies list. There was another reporter, Taylor Hansen, that went on the Ingram angle as well, that ended up on this QuietSkies list.
Somehow I managed to avoid that. I've been on Laura's show a couple times. What are we looking at right here on the screen? I'm just going to describe it for folks. There's a photo. It is of Tulsi Gabbard. Looks like her official picture when she was in Congress. It says Tulsi Gabbard, QS, Miami team from BNA to AUS. What is this all about?
Okay, so that's the actual target package. When that's deployed out, this is what those in the field see. This is her congressional photograph that's on her target package. And that is the information that was brought toward me on one of the flights. Now, we followed her on many flights, but that was one of the flights that we followed her on. And of course, the air marshals are outraged. I mean, that's her congressional sitting picture. You're targeting someone who's a lieutenant colonel, active in the military with a top secret clearance. I would think that she would have to have a top secret clearance, and you're actively targeting this person.
What is this one here? These were both made public by Wendy Mahoney on her Twitter profile, so this is in the thread. I'm not leaking anything out of turn here, but this is also something that was shared. And maybe describe what we see for people.
That's an actual agency. SMC is Special Mission Display. That's Special Mission Coverage. If you read SMC, you'll see as you go down the date and the time, and you'll also see after action reports. So there was a report that was done on Miss Gabbard on this mission, but that just showcases one of the missions, and that this is actually displayed within the National Security Database. So this database is actually open to many other individuals other than law enforcement. There are civilians within TSA, Office of Intelligence, that has this information. So we don't know how far this database goes or exactly who else. We know it's outside of law enforcement's hands as well. So we're not the only ones that see this.
The thing I'm looking at the bottom, it says FAM and subject, and there's some icons. One of them looks like kind of like a cloak and dagger spy with a cross through it. The other one looks like maybe a handgun with a cross through it. And then there's some things on the subject. Can you tell me what those mean, if you know?
Yeah, we don't. Those are new. Once we reported, Kyle, we broke this story not long ago with Taylor Hansen. Mm-hmm. So once they realized that we had broken the story and used their reporting system, they changed their reporting system. We don't really know what that means yet. This is the first time we've seen this new display. So they keep changing. The more that we expose and bring it out, they keep trying to change the game behind the scenes because they know that we're going to get our hands on this and we're going to bring it to the American people.
So we don't know under what classification she's being watched or what the predicate is?
Yeah, she's definitely a QuietSkies. If you read on the list, you'll see that it says Tulsi Gabbard with her date of birth.
Yep.
So she is a person that is on QuietSkies. So anybody that is on the QuietSkies program, she's tagged as a QuietSkies watch list.
Maybe people, and this is something I think that blew people's minds when I came out talking about the FBI's counterintelligence mission and intelligence investigations in general, is that there's not a criminal predicate. In other words, we don't have probable cause to do this. What is the predicate that allows someone to be on QuietSkies?
Well, the agency will come back, and this is what they're going to say. They're going to say that somehow she triggered one of their rules. Now, we don't know what their rule is. It's because of a geographic location she may have been in. And we know that that's just going to be a farce. She did not trigger a rule. What she did, she came out and she made some political statements recently, and it's very offensive to those within TSA. One little piece of information I want to talk about, because the deep state still is alive and well, is our TSA chief counsel is Francine Kerner. Now, what's interesting about the TSA chief counsel, Francine Kerner, she is the attorney that leaked the information on the Whitewater investigation to the Clinton administration. So the ties within TSA are very deep toward Tulsi because of the information she talked about Hillary Clinton and Benghazi, and she talked about some other things that she felt were an issue because she can do that. She's military. She can talk about those type of deployments that were an absolute failure. So the deep state is alive and well within the Transportation Security Administration, and the pendulum has always swung to a political agenda. Think about it. COVID-19 mandates, the border deployment mandates, Trump supporters. We're following Trump supporters. January 6th, not even January 6th, just people that were in the national capital region. We're following those people. We're still following those people. We're going almost 4 years and we're following people that were in the area that were never arrested or never interviewed. We're still doing that today. Everything the Air Marshal's doing is on a political scale.
I want to talk about why that is in just one second here. Let me break away and do a thanks to our sponsor, Patriot Coolers. If you guys want to support the program, you want to support a good group of people that are making an outstanding product. Nobody has told me I have sent them wrong. PatriotCoolers.com. The promo code is KYLE. This is the one that my son just ran up. I'm drinking water today because otherwise I would be going a mile a minute. This stuff is pretty wild. If you guys want to do a support for a company and carry a product that is of high quality and also supports your values. They support American veterans. They help mobility challenged veterans who've come home with amputations, with serious injuries, and they donate a portion of all of their proceeds to this group that helps retrofit houses, which is pretty neat. PatriotCoolers.com is the website. You can check out all the great stuff they've got on there, and the promo code is KYLE. You'll save 10%, and if you spend $50 or more, which is actually pretty easy to do once you start shopping, you're like, okay, I'm going to hit that free shipping thing, 10%, and you'll get free shipping over $50. So go ahead and check them out when you are so inclined. It's hot. You got to stay hydrated, and it is the summer. Why are you guys so politicized? Why is TSA, but why are the FAMs being used in so many political missions? I guess is my curiosity.
Well, I mean, if you look at the relationship between DHS Mayorkas and TSA Administrator Pekoski, they are one and the same. These are not two separate people. They are working lockstep together. Because, TSA is part of DHS. So if we look at the overall umbrella that Mayorkas has control of, to include the Secret Service, right? One thing I want to point out too, Kyle, normally the Air Marshals would be working on Secret Service details. We've always been an augmentee, so to speak, to those details. But this year we've been down on the southern border handing out water, so we could not have additional resources to help the Secret Service. So with the assassination of Trump that just occurred recently, we were outraged in regards to that because we're like, we have plenty of resources, but you're utilizing us for a political reason. They could have stopped us from being deployed to the border, brought us back, and we could have at least helped with some of the Secret Service details, but they're not doing that. They're using those resources other places they want and places they don't want.
There's a historical crossover. Didn't they pick up, or didn't Secret Service come in and they helped train the FAMs post 9/11? Because I know you guys carry the same SIGs, or at least you used to. There was like all this kind of crossover between the two agencies. There's like this historical tie there.
Yeah, what happened is, when they stood the agency up, there was 33 air marshals, and a few of those individuals had contacts with the Secret Service. Some of the Secret Service had been retired. So what they did is they brought augmentees back from the Secret Service into our agency. So for the first 5 years, there were no Air Marshal supervisors. They were all Secret Service.
Interesting. Okay, so that's the connection there.
Yeah. So they pretty much based, put all their Secret Service efforts into our agency. Number one thing that they did is everybody had to fly in suits. You weren't allowed to fly on an aircraft unless you had on a business suit. Now, as well as I do, trying to blend into a crowd on Southwest, going to Miami, you look pretty stupid when you're sitting there in Southwest with a business suit on, and then the same people that may be coming back on the mission see you again the next day with a business suit. I mean, it's pretty easy to tag the air marshal when you're on certain aircraft and you can't blend in, but we had no discretion. That was the Secret Service way. You're going to look like a G-man. We don't care if you get killed or not on the aircraft. You just better look good.
Mm-hmm. I got a DM that says, I've personally been involved in missions involving members of Congress who are on the QS list or QuietSkies list. The entire program was supposed to be dismantled, but the agency keeps running it and at an alarming rate, not making any of us safe. And it's also compromising the well-being of the FAMs. How does that sit with you?
Well, he's confused. He may have been on some missions with Congress. That's called a VIP mission. Okay. That's a very important person. That's when the Sergeant at Arms at the Capitol, the staff, the congressional representative will let their staff know to let the Sergeant at Arms send an email over to our Mission Operations Center. So that's a security detail. That's not a QuietSkies.
Fair enough.
So that's a VIP mission. And Judicial Watch did a lot of reporting on that. You can Google and look Judicial Watch. Air Marshal National Council shuts down the VIP program because this started after 2021 too, after January 6th. Air marshals were being pulled off high-risk flights for extra security details for VIPs. And we stated, well, wait a minute, how can you pull us off a high-risk flight for someone that already has a security detail? Right. That's not appropriate. So that's pretty out there. So that's the VIP mission program that this individual is talking about. That's not a QuietSkies.
Okay. How confident are you that you guys have good visibility into the malfeasance that's going on within the FAMs?
Very confident.
Okay. I feel the same way. On the back end, there's some things that you're not going to be able to talk about because you don't want to compromise these whistleblowers. Are those people balancing basically career and the need for the American people to know this? Or what is the calculus that's happening as they're kind of, because some of this stuff, this is internal screenshots. I imagine they could get in trouble just like I did.
They could, but they're willing to do that because they know it's the right thing to do. We have to shut this program down. This big domestic surveillance grab. If we don't do it, Kyle, who's going to do it? The agency is not going to police themselves. And they're going to continue the overreach. They're going to continue their corrupt behavior. And yes, these are all active air marshals. Some of them are at headquarters level. So there's there's a team here working behind the scenes to bring this information forward. I'm just the voice that can do that because I'm retired and I'm on the outside. And the team that I'm working with is still on the inside.
That checks. What about, are we confident that this is the last time we're going to see someone that is making news on the conservative side? I don't know that Tulsi is a conservative, but she's certainly more independent than being on the left as she was. Is she the only one, or are there going to be some other high profiles out there?
Well, there could be some more high profiles. Let's in the way that we want to look at this, let's hope that that's the platform that shuts this program down. You know, we've been working to shut this down since 2021. And maybe now the attention given to this overreach in the government fraud, waste, and abuse will come to light because this program needs to be stopped. I mean, even the DHS-OIG said that the agency wasted over $390 million on this program. And you got to wonder, why do you keep doing the same thing over and over in a federal law enforcement entity? Why do you do this? Well, TSA is not federal law enforcement. Let's put that clear. Number one, they're an administrative agency that's got us pretty much, our agency has been hijacked by TSA. You know, we're trying to recapture the Air Marshal Service and recapture our original mission. So that's one of our biggest problems is we've got to get out of TSA and go to a true law enforcement entity.
Yeah, and kind of maybe a final thought. Where do you suppose that the federal air marshals should land as people are talking to their congressional representatives? I assume this has got to be a congressional situation where it's relocated.
Yeah, well, we've looked at the agencies and we feel, and looking and talking with our membership as well, that Homeland Security investigations would be the best place for the air marshals to go. We could be a component within HSI. So if you look at the Richard Reed shoe bombing, by the time the air marshals, we had that threat, right? And then they hired hundreds and hundreds of air marshals. By the time the threat was over, the air marshals were still in the academy. So if we were in HSI, we would have the ability to surge, right? We've got 6,000 other agents that we could cross-train, and then our surge capacity would be fantastic, right? If we have a threat, we could surge as many people as we needed to, or many air marshals as we needed. And then when the threat dissipates, we could go back and people could do their regular duties. So we would be ready for the evolving threat. We're always behind the threat, Kyle. We have to be able to be ready and be in front of the threat. And TSA is not forward-leaning, and that will never happen as long as we're within this agency.
Makes sense. I appreciate you bringing this stuff forward. I appreciate you sharing this information. I appreciate that you continue to do that, even at some risk to some people's careers, and thank them for us, if you would, that they're willing to step up. I know what it takes to be a suspendable. I know you do as well. So thanks for them making the right decision. This stuff's got to get out there in the public.
Hey, and thank you, Kyle. Look, I know you've been fighting the good fight. You and Garrett, Steve, Marcus, so many brave people coming forward, but our country needs to see we are the people behind the scenes trying to do the right thing every day.
What is the handle? I don't have it for the Air Marshals National Council that people can follow for that as well.
It's at FAMS_AMNC, Air Marshal National Council. So it's at FAMS_AMNC.
Okay. And then you guys can also follow Sonya. It's LaBosco Sonya on Twitter, on True Social. Thank you for joining me today. I look forward to doing this again. Hopefully we don't have to do it again, but I imagine we probably will.
Thank you, Kyle, and God bless America. Keep fighting.
Amen to that. We're going to keep pushing forward, folks. We got a couple more things we're going to cover down on, and some of these things are going to probably shock you, but let's give you something, a little taste of the woman that we're talking about that is now out there in the world running things. I've got a Kamala, I guess a word salad. She's been put in charge of AI. She's been put in charge of a bunch of stuff. There's some new polling coming out that is showing how great she's doing. I just don't want to forget who this lady is. This is Kamala Harris talking about cloud computing, probably about the same level of sophistication that Joe Biden has. I don't know how good Trump would be about talking about it, but maybe less with the hand gestures. If you're missing this on the video side of it, if you're just listening on the audio, she is pantomiming each of the things she is saying. And as the chat says, no, we're playing it anyway. Let's lean into this.
So you're now no longer are you necessarily keeping those private files in some file cabinet that's locked in the basement of the house. It's on your laptop, and it's then therefore up here in this cloud that exists above us, right? It's no longer in a physical place.
Oh, it's in the thing where you have to reach into the file cabinet, and now it is in the cloud, which is above you. In her mind, I guess that made some sense. This is the lady we're talking about right now. And interestingly, when you criticize her, you're now going to find yourself, apparently, at least if you're a high enough profile, you have the potential of finding yourself on a watch list. I wanted to let Sonya go before I talk about some of the things that you can do to spot federal marshals, maybe not federal air marshals, but other federal agents, guys like what I used to do on your plane. It's worth knowing because I'm fairly confident that Garrett and I were both followed in April of last year. We talked about that just a little bit. What we didn't talk about is how you can kind of eyeball what that does. And so if you're someone who likes to get to the airport early, you have a much higher chance of seeing this. If you're being followed by a federal team, most likely they will not be in place, a federal team from the FBI or HSI or something like that. The Federal Air Marshals are there hours and hours before you ever get to the airport. So the odds of you catching them on a domestic flight, watching you, not nearly as high. But when it comes to other federal agencies like the ones I worked for, they're not nearly as early. They have other duties or they have other things going on, and they're probably going to have to turn around and fly back home afterwards. So the one thing you can do is they all are required to check in with the flight attendant or the air crew or the ground crew people at the desk. So when you go up and you want to make a change to your reservation, or if you want to make sure that you can, do a plane side check-in of your stroller, that's the place that you would go. And they all go up there and they all have to present credentials, which is something kind of interesting. And then they all have to go and check in with the pilot in the cockpit. So if you see someone that kind of illogically steps out of line and goes up to the front, and I used to do this, we board first. Usually you can board with the military. You can jump into that line and be the first ones on the plane, but they're the ones that are usually sitting on there first, which is how I picked out my little team. And they have to go and check in with the plane. There's a couple of little easy ways to see them. And then I also find, and if you're good at spotting guns on people, then you can do that too. But a lot of folks don't know how to conceal their weapon really well. I'll share a little quick personal story. My first surveillance trip, we flew up to Alaska. We were going to go watch a so-called white supremacist who actually was not accused of any crimes. As we mentioned earlier, no predicate, simply was part of a group that they didn't like, who were sort of like racist preppers. Apparently everybody is racist. And if you also want to train to be like an MMA fighter and store food or water or munitions or whatever, then you're a big problem for the federal government. So we go for this flight. We're flying out of the DC area. It must have been out of Dulles, but I couldn't say if it was Dulles or Reagan off the top of my head. Probably Dulles. And I noticed one of the guys on my team. Now, I hadn't met this guy yet, but I had a pretty good idea he was on my team because he was walking with his holster exposed and his firearm next to the gate in the secured part, wearing plain clothes, no obvious badge, no nothing else. He's seriously wearing like one of these plastic Safariland holsters, which are non-concealment, although the FBI calls them concealment holsters. And I saw his gun exposed. And I walked up and I said, "Hey, your gun is exposed." And he went, "Oh," and he just covered it up. And then you could just see it in what we call printing, where the shirt basically outlines over the top of the weapon. So the folks that are doing this may or may not be that interested in being really good at it. I always carried my appendix, which is up in the front. It's very hard to see a gun there. It's also easy to get to it out of a seat in an aircraft. But you see these people, they phone it in. They may or may not care. Some of them are closer to retirement and kind of have maybe a lackadaisical attitude about this kind of stuff. It's kind of shocking. But that early to the gate, the first one on the plane, checking in with the pilot, all those things are easy ways to check it out. And most surveillance teams are going to travel at least in twos when they're going to be doing a on-foot manned surveillance, particularly on a plane. So Garrett and I saw at least two and maybe three. The two that I saw did something really crazy, and I'll just kind of give you another instinct. If you duck them when you're in the airport, which is really fun to do if you know what you're doing, and sit and watch. I watched two guys who boarded the plane at different times, who left the plane at the same time, and then spread out. And then when I disappeared, one of them went shooting towards the baggage claim, 5 or 10 minutes later, another guy goes and does the same thing. And then about 15 minutes after both of them crossed, they both came back up towards the security entrance where you could no longer go. They were going up into the security checkpoint that you're not allowed to go. It's the exit only space. And they were looking furiously in all the little gift shops and stuff where I was hiding out and watching and laughing and having a cup of coffee. This is a real thing. They do this kind of stuff. And now apparently following Tulsi Gabbard, it is not because some of these folks want to do that. As you can see, they are starting to leak this information. And it's really problematic, I think. It's problematic. So again, if you guys want to read the whole story, you can go to uncoverdc.com. And Wendy Strzok-Mahoney wrote this piece in conjunction with whistleblowers and Sonya LaBosco. We appreciate them doing that. One of the issues that Sonya brought up is the sort of the weakness on the border policy. I want to kind of play this. This is Chris Murphy. There's a total spin job going on, and I want to cover the end of this show talking about the information op that is going on very aggressively. And the information op is trying to push the idea that we have something going on that is not happening. It's completely astroturfed, which is to say it's not a grassroots level. It is a push to make people feel that something that is not real is real. It's polling. It is mainstream media talking about the excitement about Kamala Harris. I've got some fun things about that, but end of the day, their record is atrocious. And whether it's politicizing the air marshals or whether it is simply ignoring border security, they're making false claims and they're hoping that low information people are going to just adopt it. Here's a little taste of Chris Murphy, who has kind of been a proxy for the now Kamala Harris campaign, which used to be the Biden campaign.
First of all, Kamala Harris has always been for border security. And the fact of the matter is this campaign is going to involve a enormously important contrast between the Biden-Harris administration, which has pushed for bipartisan border security legislation that would fix the problems at the border, and Donald Trump, who killed that bipartisan deal. Today, border crossings are lower at the southwest border than they were at the end of the Trump presidency.
I'll call it fact challenge. That's the only way that you can describe this kind of stuff. It's been pretty clear that Kamala Harris has been very radical on the border. She was supposedly this border czar, but now we say that she's not a border czar because they need to try to push this. And now they're pushing the same thing. People are excited. Democrats are excited. I'm going to show you the polling, and then I'm going to show you something that's deep in the polls. What you usually see is the headline that they want you to focus on, one or two little questions that got a favorable answer for their preferred candidate. And so we've got a little amusing CBS take. This is CBS's polling. It's a CBS YouGov poll that is pushing this narrative, again, that she did such a great job. And I'm over here looking at it. It's going to give her a boost. They show all these little snapshots and they created some infographics, which we'll put on the screen. Then I'm going to show you the questions that I think are the most interesting to me. Here's a little video clip of the coverage of this polling. Again, basically creating false excitement.
First of all, Kamala Harris has always been.
That is not the one. That is still Chris Murphy. Here we go. Sorry. People think that she's not entirely the same as Joe Biden, except that she mostly is.
There's a larger number who say they think her policies are similar, mostly the same, but not entirely the same as Joe Biden's. So it's that little bit of difference defining what that is that I do think is going to be key to watch in the campaign in the next few weeks.
That's one of the dumbest little sound clips. It's very funny. It's they basically think that she's identical, except a small people think that she's a tiny little bit different than Joe Biden, and we're going to have to find out what that difference is. The difference is she might actually be dumber and she's less politically capable, even though the other guy was basically barely sentient. So here are the big takeaways from the CBS piece. Essentially, in battleground states, Trump versus Harris, 50-50 polling in likely voters. I don't think it's even that close. I think these are nonsensical, and that nationally they think that Trump is down by 1%. Again, I don't find that to be realistic, but it doesn't really make a difference. There's another piece here that's talking about black voters. And this actually is somewhat interesting because if you actually read between the lines here, you'll understand that this is not a good poll for Harris. Now, Biden versus Harris was showing 73-24, which is to say that Democrat voters were, or black voters were favoring the Democrat candidate 73% to 24%. However, in 2020, if you believe the numbers, it was 92% in favor of Joe Biden. So that's a major slip. That's a 20-point slip in the last 4 years. Then you go over to this new polling, which is essentially showing that there's a difference and that Kamala Harris is slightly more favorable, 81% to 18%. Again, that is more than a 10-point drop, which is a catastrophic drop. And then you also look that the margin of error in this polling is almost 5 points, which is to say it could be as low as like 76%, 77%, which is almost the same as what we were talking about with Biden. I don't think there's significant excitement about Kamala Harris in these pollings, and I'm going to show you why that is in a second. I'm going to throw a couple more infographics because these are the things they highlighted. Apparently, there's an excitement to go vote. 58% of registered black voters said they were going to vote when Biden was the choice, and now 74% have stepped up. You're telling me that Kamala is moving the needle and making more black people interested in voting when they wouldn't have voted before? I don't buy it. And then lastly, this little piece from the clip here, the Harris-Biden policy positions are nearly 20% say they're entirely the same, 64% said they're mostly the same, and 20% of people, I don't know who these people are, think that they're mostly different or entirely different. I also am going to show you why I don't think that matters at all. Here's a little meme that I got over the weekend that I think is funny. This is the real story. Harris for president. It's a white woman on a cell phone going on maybe a metro train going past a burning city, saying, I like that she has whites-only fundraisers. I'm fairly confident that Kamala Harris, the only people that are truly excited about a Kamala Harris presidency are sort of like the worst people in the world that we talk about. That's what J.D. Vance called the childless cat ladies, or what my buddy Steve Friend calls just these white wine women that they have no skin in the game, and they just are doing this virtue signaling. They want to vote for a black and or Indian and or both female president simply because she is those things. We've got a little palate cleanser that will make you laugh about that. How about this little piece? Because these are also interesting. And sometimes when you start getting down to the nitty gritty, this is deeper in the article, but I think it's of value. People almost said that that Harris and Trump have the same amount of energy. Now, Trump is almost 80 and Kamala Harris is not even 60. There's a 20-year difference, but they basically have less than a 7 or an 8-point gap between them when it comes to energetic. I don't know who cares about people being energetic. I'm more interested in them being serious. When it comes to them being focused, whatever the hell that means as well, these are like nonsensical terms. We have 56% to 52%, so Trump is slightly less focused. That makes sense if you've heard Trump talk. Then again, if you've heard Kamala talk, you might have some different animals to go and chew on there. Competency, that's the one I think is funny. 50% and 50%, 51 and 50. Essentially, they both think that they're equally competent, but Donald Trump is far tougher, and he's also more effective. So that stuff makes me laugh. And then lastly, they put these things in there. For women who are registered voters, would the policies help women? That means almost nothing. But again, we're trying to push this divide. Let me show you what I think is the most important piece in this particular poll. The upside to this poll is I was able to scroll down, and on Scribd, they actually have, or Scriber, they had the actual questions that were being asked. And that's the thing that I always want to know. What are these questions? Why are people responding to them the way they do? And here is the real meat. Would you ever consider voting for Kamala Harris this year? For people who are most likely not going to vote for Kamala. 91% of people said, I would never vote for Kamala Harris, no matter what happens. Okay, so that tells us that there is about a 9% chance that there are some people in the middle. And that's what we always talk about. Those independents are about 10% of the population. Same story with Donald Trump. Would you ever consider voting for Donald Trump if you're not inclined to do so right now? 93% said that they would not vote for Donald Trump. So there's a 6% there. There's this small margin of people, it's about 10% of the population tops, that are actually going to vote and actually are convincible. And most of them are not very convincible. They're in the maybe category. It says 7% on the Kamala piece and 5% for Donald Trump. Almost the same numbers there. Most people have their mind made up. So it's that last, maybe let's say 2, 3, 4% of people in the undecided category that would even be interested. And some of those people are probably just saying it to be nice because they're talking to a pollster. Women, I'm looking at you. You're the ones that want to be nice to pollsters and don't want to say what's true. I don't blame you, by the way. Like, I don't tell pollsters the truth either because I don't really care what they have to say. The interesting thing is the main reasons why people are voting for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump. This is another little question. There's 2 of them on here. The main reason is because they like Kamala or she's a Democrat. That comes out to being almost 60% of the answer. And about 41% said they hate Donald Trump. Okay, that's fair. That actually makes a lot of sense to me that people are coming out against Donald Trump. But the motivation against Donald Trump is going to be less of a motivator than I really like our candidate. The difference is when you look at the Donald Trump favorability stuff. Mostly, almost 60% of the people that are going to vote for Donald Trump said they're going to do so because they really like Donald Trump. Only 16% said because he's a Republican nominee and they vote Republican. There's a bigger enthusiasm behind Donald Trump when you look at this polling, and that is not what is being reported there. I don't think that Kamala Harris motivates people because of who she is. I think maybe it's because she's on the Democrat ticket, and the contrast because Joe Biden is freaking terrible. There's a little funny piece from the Sunday News Clips. This is Leslie Stahl talking to Nancy Pelosi. If you don't understand how fake this stuff is, I'm going to show you 2 little videos of drunken Nancy talking to CBS about, she didn't do a coup. You listen and see if this seasoned liar who may or may not be day drunk is saying things that you believe. Because I think this is why we have Kamala. It's like they had no other choice but to push out the old guy.
There have been reports that it was Nancy Pelosi who orchestrated a coordinated effort to squeeze President Biden to drop out. Please tell us what you told President Biden to persuade him to step aside.
Well, I've never shared any conversations with the President of the United States publicly, no.
It's said that he's furious at you. Is he?
Well, he knows that I love him very much.
I understand that you don't want to own this, but it is so well reported that you were the leader of a pressure campaign.
No, I wasn't a leader of any pressure party. Well, let me say things that I didn't do. I didn't call one person. I did not call one person. I could always say to him, I never called anybody. What I'm saying is I had confidence that the president would make the proper choice for our country, whatever that would be. And I said that, whatever that is.
Did you notice that she doesn't answer any of the questions? Not even a single one of them. My favorite is when Leslie's talking and Nancy Pelosi goes, Nyam. She didn't lead any pressure party. She's even fallen over her words. It's a mess. It's so weird. But my favorite is that she just doesn't answer a question. They're like, did you lead the pressure campaign? And she was like, Joe Biden knows I love him. It's like, that's not what we asked. And she was like, well, what did you do? And she was like, let me tell you what I didn't do. Let me just answer whatever the hell I want. And because she's Nancy Pelosi, no one pushes her on it. Here's how I know Nancy Pelosi is completely full of camel dung. Are you ready?
So he was in a good place to make whatever decision, the top of his game. Such a consequential president of the United States, a Mount Rushmore kind of president of the United States. Want to know what comes next?
That he belongs up there on Mount Rushmore. Lincoln and Joe Biden.
But you got Teddy Roosevelt up there, and he's wonderful. I don't say take him down, but you can add Biden.
Let's put Joe Biden on Mount Rushmore. And Leslie Stahl can't even take that. She's like, wait, what did you just say? You got George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Teddy Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln, and Joe Biden. And she was like, yeah, I'm not saying take Teddy Roosevelt down. I'm just saying put Biden up too. She doesn't even believe that she said that. She's like, oh, you vodka, you've done it to me again. How could this be? How could I have gotten away from it? It's so silly. There's no seriousness there at all. And I don't think, I think that Nancy Pelosi's been lying so long that like she doesn't even believe her own bullshit anymore. She just can't handle it. God, it's so silly. I wanted to touch a couple of little things that are going on in the world that are maybe bigger, crazier, darker. This is one that I saw. We keep talking about that there's going to be some kind of a civil war, that we're going to see like a meltdown in the United States. And I want you to understand how different the world looks when you are not in the United States, and what a conflict in your backyard might look like. What you're looking like on the screen right now is from CBS. It's reporting that shows that there was an attack on a beach hotel. Al-Qaeda-linked groups killed at least 32 people in Somalia. Does that affect you even a little bit? Did you even know? If we had 32 people killed in a bombing attack, a suicide bombing at a hotel in the United States, would that not blow your mind? Let's say it happened in, I don't know, Chicago. Let's say it happened, because this was in Mogadishu. Imagine it happened in Washington, D.C. Someone drove a bomb into a parking garage and killed 32 people. The value of human life in other countries, in other places, in places that are experiencing this like warless and sort of lawlessness and have for decades, it is not what I want in this country. And so I hope that there's a better answer. The problem is we keep seeing examples of kind of scary stuff happening in otherwise civilized places. If you've seen it in France, we've seen it in the UK. I want to show you a contrast, because this is what it could look like. This is what a Mogadishu looks like. This is what people who are just indiscriminately killing strangers look like. And the terror cells are far more likely than like organized groups of the southern states versus the northern states, or the Republicans versus the Democrats. We're not going to see that. It's going to be neighbor on neighbor and people who look like you doing violence in your world, which is why we should be praying that never happens here. And it is not something that anybody should embrace or get excited about. The sad thing is we're seeing some of this stuff going on now in England, and I don't see anyone in the national news, at least not the national political figures, talking about the amount of people that are fed up with the multicultural failure. And if you call it out, then apparently you're a bigot. But let me just show you, these are Muslims on the march in England that are mad that they are being called out for something that people in their community have done. They're obviously not all responsible for it. This is the response, though. This is a bunch of men. They're carrying knives, they're carrying axes, and they are marching around. This is in England, so they don't have access to firearms in the same way. But just a little video taste, and then I'm going to show you the reaction, because this is how you get there. They're in Western clothes and they're marching around and they're standing, and there's about a half dozen cops there. And then, of course, the answer to this was that a far-right mob stormed and burned down a hotel that was housing, quote-unquote, asylum seekers, or people that have fled in and invaded this country. They started a fire with the people inside. You're seeing anarchist banners, including it's the a bastardized version of the English flag and the cross. But people, these are you're creating space for people who want violence and mayhem to pop up and do that. And so I want to show you this little thing. This is happening in England. They're burning a Holiday Inn of all things, but the reason that the Holiday Inn was the target is because there are migrants, illegal immigrants, asylum seekers, take your pick of whatever you want to call them. How far away could we see this happening in the United States? And my answer is yeah, we already saw the opposite of this. We already saw this in 2020. And I don't see people doing mental gymnastics. They've condemned this as a far-right mob. The article actually quotes them as being thugs, which apparently you can say as long as it's white people in England. A little taste of what that looked like. It's insanity. It's a freaking Holiday Inn Express, people, in a civilized nation, or what at least used to be a civilized nation. I think that stuff is really scary. I really do. It makes me concerned that there's the possibility of that breaking in this country. And there's also at least a faction of people that are not grassroots, but are getting boosted to say, yeah, this is a great idea. We should just go ahead and let's just get to the Civil War part of this thing. If you're not prepared to see that happening down the street from you, and your livelihood going up in flames, or your neighborhood burning, or people coming in and being on the opposite side of it, then that's not something that you should be cheering on. I also can see that the rage of what we saw in the 2020, the fentanyl Floyd type riots, those things were not condemned. And so the left does have this stuff coming. It just doesn't mean that it's good for anyone. It's worth noting that. I want to talk about some of the things that are really important. The reason why I bring this stuff up is not just to be doing fear porn or sharing this. It's because when we know more things, sometimes the outcomes actually come out. This was buried in ABC News below the fold. It says Lloyd Austin has revoked the plea deal for the alleged 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the two others. This is the thing that we covered on Thursday's show. A lot of people were outraged. The New York Post did a great expose on it, showing that they were upset about this. And the claim is, and this is another problem because there's two levels to this. The claim is the Biden administration didn't actually even know that there was going to be a plea deal, that the military prosecutors went up and set that up without telling anybody. I want you to hear that again. The Secretary of Defense said that they didn't even know that this deal was created, and therefore, he says, I hereby withdraw from the 3 pretrial arrangements that were signed on July 31st, 2024 in the above referenced case, effective immediately. We are no longer, I reserve the authority to myself. It's not that they did something and they were sad about it. It's always the same. It's that they got caught doing it. It is the reason why independent media is so important. It's the reason why people on both sides of the aisle, and we need to have, Republicans held in check as well. But thank God that this story leaked out through the New York Post. Somebody told them of this agreement, and now these 3 are now back facing the death penalty, which is what George Hill has argued they should have always had, or they should be facing a lifetime of confinement. It is worth knowing that without the reporting and everyone getting outraged and that being a problem, then this goes forward and they let this guy off the hook. and put him back out on the battlefield. And he's not too old to be involved in things again. And he's also got 20 years of not just being studied, but studying us and being pissed off and radicalized. The second thing is the idea that, again, it's always the question of incompetence or malfeasance, because either they were completely incompetent and actually didn't know what the prosecutors were doing, which is a possibility. We have to admit that. That means that is what the deep state does. It just goes out there and pursues its own ends. The administrative state are people that think that they should have the right answer. So they just do it, whether or not the president agrees, whether or not the administration in power does. The other possibility is that they're completely lying to us. And we're kind of like 50-50, if you want to be honest about that, which one is true. When we talk about government, the likelihood of them being complete liars is very high. The likelihood of them being totally incompetent, if you are a really cynical person the way that many of us are at this point. If you're being truly honest, it's also possible that they just went out there and made their own deal and thought, yeah, this is the best deal. Of course they're going to be into it. Jake Sullivan had to go back and say that the White House had no role in the plea deal that was worked out, and it was only military prosecutors. If that's the case, nobody is running this country, and our enemies are watching. There's no doubt in my mind that they can see what we're doing. If you just joined us and you are in the chat right there, make sure you guys have hit the live or hit this thumbs up and subscribe. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel. We're going over important issues on purpose, and we're doing so in a way that I hope is just going to enlighten you. These are the things that we showed with Sonya LaBosco. I wanted to put them back on the screen because they are at the end here. This is the evidence that Tulsi Gabbard is in fact being watched. These are coming from screenshots, from group chats, from Federal Air Marshals. If you guys need to go back and watch the beginning of it, by all means do so. I'll leave you with a little bit of lighthearted stuff because we might as well. I keep thinking about this whenever I hear about white dudes for Kamala and some of the word salad she puts together and the stupidity. I cannot help but think that the coalition of crazy people, they fall into this Ryan Long category. So here's a little amusing piece from woke people are basically the same as racist people. They keep telling us this, including that fundraiser. Like, I like that she has the white only fundraisers. This is Ryan Long doing a now famous piece, but it's so true. It makes you laugh because of the pain that it should cause the sort of loony lefty racists out there. They're always the same. They all sound like this to me.
When me and Brad first met, I didn't think we'd get along, but turns out we kind of agree on everything. Your racial identity is the most important thing. Everything should be looked at through the lens of race.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke. We both have a lot of opinions about people of color, even though we barely know any.
I say colored people, but as long as we're classifying them, we both think minorities are a united group who think the same and act the same.
And vote the same. You don't want to lose your black card. Sorry, I don't know. I just think we should roll back
discrimination laws so we can hire based on race again. Jinx, now you owe me a Coke. Hey, tell them what you told me yesterday.
White actors should only do voices for white cartoon characters.
I've been saying that for years. Stick to your own.
Us white people, we have so much privilege.
I agree. It is a privilege to be white. Ask him about interracial dating.
All I said is that black men who date white women have internalized racism, and white men that date ethnic women are fetishizing them.
Guys against interracial dating now. Like, am I being pranked? Did Boomer put you up to this?
Ugh, you know that taco place is white owned?
White people should be making white foods like Kraft macaroni and cheese, no seasoning, not even salt. It's like he's a mind reader. I mean, I've been pushing for segregation forever, and my man does what?
I created an improv comedy show exclusively for ethnic people.
Guy segregates comedy on my birthday.
White people need to stop wearing dreadlocks, and they need to stop appropriating black people's music.
Shaved heads and country music, the way God intended.
You know all white people are racist.
I'm listening.
Even if you have a black wife or a black friend group, you're still really racist.
You know, we just kicked a guy out of the organization for having a black girlfriend, but if you can promise me he's still really racist, we'll consider letting him back in.
Black people should only shop at black businesses. I guess the only thing we really disagree about is I think white people are the root of all evil.
But what did I tell you, though? If we can narrow that down to a certain group of tiny-hatted white people, I think we can come to an understanding.
Technically, I don't consider Jewish people white.
Neither do I.
It's so bad. Anyway, the white dudes for Harris, the fact that they're segregating all this stuff goes back to that comedy routine. And that was predating this presidential run. It's still good. I'm going to round up with a word salad and then a comedic take on that again. We're going to do comedy because that's how we do it when we close these things out. Folks, if you want to check out the pins that you saw like Sonya LaBosco was wearing, if you want to support our program, you can do so by supporting my buddy, Garrett O'Boyle, another whistleblower who's still in the fight and still suing the FBI. I'm wearing one of them as well today, and you guys can find those at the-suspendables.com. If you saw the interview that I did on The Blaze, both Steve Baker, who's a Blaze investigative reporter, he's wearing one of the pins. You guys can find those. Use my promo code, which doesn't give me anything. It just saves you some money. It's like 10% off. KYLE. It's the same as everything else. It's in the show notes if you guys are looking for it. The-suspendables.com. Let's do a Kamala word salad for fun. This is a guy who's got a channel talking about nursing school and just a reminder of how capable this woman is and why she has such low excitement about her. It's because she's basically a functional retard. And thank God for Joe Rogan's show saying that, pointing it out. The 3 drunk faces of Kamala Harris are in fact correct. Here's a little taste of that. Don't worry, don't gag. We've got a wrap up for all this stuff. It's all gonna come together nicely. Word salad, talking about the significance of the passage of time in a different way.
Today is today, and yesterday was today yesterday. Tomorrow will be today tomorrow. So live today, so the future today will be as the past today as it is tomorrow.
What?
Hi, everybody. I am a white dude for Kamala. And I just want to say, can I just say something, especially to the far-right MAGA? Can you just get it in your fat red hats that Kamala Harris or Kamala is running for president, okay? Sure, she's not articulate. Sure, she talks in rhyme and sometimes sounds like she's reading out of a Dr. Seuss book when she's explaining a potential World War III scenario. Sure, she's never been to the border, but she also hasn't been to Europe, okay? She hasn't been to the Gaudi exhibits in Barcelona. She hasn't been to Soul Cycle. She hasn't taken a pottery class. So what? What's your point? Sure, she has more vocal fry than RFK Jr. Okay. Sure, I have to put earplugs in when she cackles like a retarded hyena. Sure, she has no idea what she's talking about. Sure, she's put thousands of black men in jail for marijuana charges, okay? But she has a vagina. And she's a black person, Indian black Indian brown black person of color, a colorful black Indian person with a vagina. So she's qualified. She has a gaping hole in between her legs. She has a sloppy pile of burnt end brisket stuffed in between her pantsuit, which is blue, by the way. She's wearing a blue pantsuit. She has dark brown hair, and her pronouns are she, her, okay? And my pronouns are vote for her.
It's Tyler Fisher. You could tell that's satire. It's so bad. Listen, that's the excitement that she has a vagina. It's the same one that was exciting about Hillary Clinton. They're both equally awful. They're both unlikable. They're both pretty gross. Didn't work out well for Hillary. Don't get comfortable, though. And don't take the polls. Do you remember the polls in 2016 talking about how dominating she was, a political juggernaut? It was time to coronate her. There was no way anybody could win. It's the reason why I was up in November, whatever the heck the date was, 4th or 5th or whatever, in at the Academy of Quantico, laughing myself to sleep with tears running down my face when Donald Trump won in 2016. We're in the same scenario right now. The difference is that a lot of things have been unveiled. 1, the polling lying. 2, the COVID insanity. 3, the racist nature of all this stuff. It's too silly. Let me give you a 5-star review. This is coming from one of our great... Yes, I know. The brisket thing got me too. You guys in the chat are already on it. All right. This is from one of our great listeners on Apple. We appreciate it. From TX79707. Do you even know that that's your number? TX79707 says, refreshing content, 5 stars. The content reminds me of Bongino back in the renegade Republican days. Relevant, focused content on the topics of the day. Highly recommend. We appreciate you. Thanks so much for leaving us a review. If you want to leave us one, do so on Apple, on Spotify. I think there's an option now in some of the other places too. A 5-star review. Throw us a comment. If you're watching on the video, make sure you've liked it, and we will see you again tomorrow. This is going to be a weird week, and I will let you know right now at the tail end of this thing. I'm doing Timcast on Thursday, so I may have one less show this week, but you'll be able to see me on Timcast probably for a long time. I'm going to fly out and do that. They invited me. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but it's always a good time to get on and talk to another audience. Thanks so much for joining us. God bless all of you. We will see you again tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.